Hey everybody, welcome back to I Know a Guy. If you're new here, my name is Anthony. I'm a business profit advocate. On this show, we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals, and just people doing cool things. For example, today we're meeting with Noah Healy, a professional algorithm developer and a recreational mathematician who's developed a patent pending system to revolutionize commodity markets, making production more profitable and unlocking economic potential while also navigating a legal battle with the federal government over his patent. How you doing today, Noah?
I'm doing pretty good. Getting prepped for the holiday.
Yeah, yeah, you and me both. I'm doing a little bit more traveling than I am cooking, so I'll have to prep beforehand and make sure it's able to survive the trip. So, what are your plans? Anything big?
I've got sort of the central house for one half of my family, so I got 14 people coming over. So I'll be making dessert for 14, and sort of hosting. We've got turkey and ham coming in.
Yeah, yeah, awesome, awesome. What's the dessert you're planning on making? Do you have a specialty or just you making a couple?
I have several specialties, but I think I'm making cake with fudge icing and pumpkin pie, for this one, and maybe something else, as well.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm not the best baker. I prefer, like working on the oven, stovetop. But yeah, anybody that can bake, it's all numbers and weights and everything, and it just gets right over my head. So.
Yep, yep. That's baking's the thing I'm good at.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So where are you calling in from? Where are you located?
So I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia,
Okay. Are you from the area originally or you newer there?
born and raised.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, what do people do when they visit your area? What's the fun thing to do out there?
The big thing around here is history. This is Thomas Jefferson's hometown. So if you've ever seen the back of a nickel, that's Monticello. You can walk. Monticello is about 2 miles in that direction. Actually, I think it's closer to a mile and a half if you could walk straight, which you can't because you'd get run over on 64. Uh, but yeah, just next door to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello is Ashland Highlands, which was James Monroe's home. So the third and fifth presidents of the United States are both from here. Uh, University of Virginia, which Jefferson founded, is also here. So people that are just showing up, usually doing sort of the history tourism stuff. Most of the people that come here are coming here either to attend UVA or because they fell in love with the place when they attended UVA and they're coming back.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that history. I've never been there. That is something that I'd like to do though, because uh, there's something about our history. It's not that long ago, so you kind of have a little bit a different connection to it than I think you would over visiting castles and things like that. We never had that. So.
Yeah, most of these places uh, have had some rough times, but they're all in reconstruction, and so it's not like looking at ruins from 1,000 years ago or something that you can get in, European or I've been to China, and places like the Forbidden City are kept up, but obviously are no longer used for their built purpose.
Mhm. Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So what can you tell us about what you do? So you're a professional algorithm developer and recreational mathematician. I took algebra twice in high school, so I'm not the most well off in the math space, but I think a lot of people know algorithms just by, oh, there's a Facebook algorithm, there's a YouTube algorithm. So we're used to kind of the high level about what they are, but what can you tell us about what you're doing with all that?
Well, algorithms are these processes. Essentially, they're machines. What a computer is a special kind of a machine that you can hand the plans for a machine, and it will behave like it's the machine you handed it the plans for. So, like, imagine if instead of having a car or a pickup truck or a tractor, you had this device and you could feed the blueprints for a car or a pickup truck or a tractor into it, and it would turn itself into whichever one of those things, or motorcycle or whatever. Um, or kitchen appliances. If you had one appliance, and depending whether you pressed the refrigerator or stove or dishwasher button, it was whichever one of those things you wanted it to be. That's how computers work. And so algorithms are these blueprints, essentially, uh, or in some cases, sort of the blueprint of the blueprint. That's what programming is ultimately about. And one of the tricks for this is that there's an enormous scope for wasted time and effort. So you'd said you'd taken algebra a couple of times. Algebra is basically a set of rules to find the solutions to certain kinds of abstract problems. But there can be shortcuts in some cases to find solutions to those problems. So one algebra problem that's really important in computers, in computer gaming, is figuring out what scale you should be doing for distant objects inside your video game. So rather than having a drawing of a demon at 5 feet and 5 feet 1 inch and 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 3 inches, all the way out to like 40 miles or something. It's a lot more practical to create a sort of render model or whatever of the demon that your characters are going to be shooting at and saying, okay, well, this demon is, 700 yards away. How much do I scale that model down? And that particular problem has to do with uh, finding inverse square roots. Square roots because you take square roots to find out what distances are, and inverses because the scaling factor of distance is inverted. So if you are looking at an object, two copies of an object, and one of them is twice as far away from your eye as the other one, the length, breadth, and depth that you'll perceive in the second object, it will be half of the length, breadth, and depth of the first object. So computing an inverse square root is a task that we can describe algebraically. It's expensive computationally. In the early days of computer visual hardware and so on, we didn't really have the oomph to do it. And so there's a very famous hack that appeared, I want to say, in the first version of the Unreal Engine, but it might have been one of the like later Dooms or something. But it was that group, John Carmack is famously associated with it, where they worked out this calculus trick where they were able to do the entire operation without basically by making a particular guess that when you did a particular update to the guess, it gave you an answer that was so good that the visual, like the monitors at the time, couldn't tell the difference between the guess and the real answer. Um, and removed most of the expensive operations, including critically, you didn't have to take a square root at all because the way the guessing worked, the square roots canceled each other out, and it became a straightforward linear problem. So that's the kind of thing that algorithmic development is about. One, sort of figuring out what those plans are that or how to get to where you're going, but also how to do so in ways that are potentially hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of times faster than you might otherwise be able to do it.
That's awesome. In the majority of all instances, if I turn the game on or something, it just might as well just be magic to me. So it's kind of cool to see behind, how the algebra I took twice in high school can kind of be used because that was one of the big questions, and I think a lot of people had that in high school and in college is when will this ever be applicable to my life? So it's kind of cool to see like things you're interacting with every day that uses that kind of that kind of math, that kind of computing. So, but yeah, so you created an algorithm. That revolutionized commodity markets. What can you tell us like that process was, and then inevitably you ended up, in a legal battle with the federal government over the patent. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the process of coming up with it was a similar kind of a thing that I was just describing. I was finding a way to apply an approach to a problem set. So I had this approach where I'd come up with this way to extract a computer program from a situation. Uh, and, and so I needed to recast the marketplace as one of those situations and then work out with the computer program that would be extracted from that. Uh, and so it required uh, a lot of deep knowledge of existing market structure and incentive, and a lot of creative thought about how these parts could be taken apart and put back together. So the traditional market operates on this buyer-seller paradigm where effectively the buyer presents half a contract, a buy contract, where they say, I'll buy this much for this much money. And the seller has the seller half of the contract that says, I'll sell that much for that much money. And the marketplace just takes these contracts and says, okay, well, these two people agree on an amount of money. So we'll just make, unit trades. This guy wants six and that guy wants five. So we'll have five trades happen at the price that you're interested in, and I'll have one trade left over to buy later. And maybe somebody else will want that half of that contract and so on. I found a way to effectively tear that contract into three pieces, and instead of making them individualized trades, make them sort of batched up trades. And that's valuable because the sort of the more counterparties that are available, that the safer or the more liquid the marketplace is. Because the existing market is all one to one, the only way they can achieve liquidity, particularly with modern computers, is by operating incredibly quickly. And that incredible speed leads to a lot of the destabilization we're seeing in our economy, uh, because the markets can turn in a millionth of a second, and we can't physically move stuff around, that fast. Uh, and so we get into these situations where we're sort of working against our own interests. And so that's why my system would actually allow us to have a high functioning economy again, whereas the existing system, sadly, is pretty much going to parasitically death spiral. Um, However, that gets me to sort of getting the system in place. And one of the paths for that is getting the patent. And that's been a rocky road. So in 2020, the Patent Office actually violated its own legally mandated regulations and chose to ignore their own acceptance of my patent. And since then, with absolutely no evidence of any kind, they've made two separate assertions, both of which are not nonsensical. The first one, again, is algorithmic and technical, but effectively boils down to doing hundreds of thousands of times better is meaningless to us. Um, and that would be, quite a surprise to other patents if the standard was more than hundreds of thousands of times improvement. And the second one was that the patent was overexpansive, and what makes this particularly galling is that the language that they're pointing to as too broad is actually language that they dictated to us. I had an attorney at the time, and they had consultations with them. And so the record reflects that they effectively wrote the language that they're now objecting to, saying at the time that the language would be narrow. And so they're now saying, well, you could interpret the language to be overly broad. And it's like, well, you could, but if you read your own records, it was written that way at your insistence to not be that way. So, you know, like we said over and over again, you can't just look at this sentence in isolation. You have to look at how the sentence got there. It got there because there's no intention to go overly broad with it. So, um, they've offered no supporting arguments for any of these things. They've never even addressed the fact that they're in violation of their procedures, which actually claim that they have to give me the patent 4 years ago. So I appealed uh, their decisions to federal court. I made my filing in the beginning of November. They were on the hook to produce a response by early December, at which point, if I wanted to, I would have a couple weeks to form a rebuttal. But the attorney has pled that since he has two other cases that are also on his plate, he doesn't have time to get to my case, and so he filed for a 30-day extension. So he now has until early January, I think the 10th, to file. And the clerk saw it his way. So I've got another month of limbo before I find out what the patent office is going to try to pull this time.
Okay. Yeah, well, the government doing things like that, that's that's kind of par for the course. But to rewind a little bit, so improvements of orders of magnitude, hundreds of thousands of times improvement. If you're talking something that's just going to be like a couple times improvement, it might only affect a small group of people. But I imagine something that is that much of a change, that much of an improvement would affect kind of people on their day-to-day lives. Am I wrong with assuming that?
Oh, absolutely. So right now, the average sort of return on, say, a wheat farm is somewhere around the neighborhood of $1 in $7. So you you have $700,000 of revenue, you have like about $100,000 in profit on average. And there's a lot of people that are a lot closer to the knuckle than that on on average. Um, And that's pretty standard across many commodities. Oil profits are even lower. Oil profits run from about $1.12 to about $1.08 usually, about $1.10 on average. So in many of these production fields, the there's a lot of money being made, but it's being spread out very far. It's not like buying Apple in the 80s or anything. It's a lot of work and it's a small return. The average cost of using the existing marketplaces is around $1 in $6. So the cost of getting the deal made on average is larger than the profits from having the deal being made for most, and I would say the vast majority of producers. And that means that even even cutting that modestly would improve the margins of these businesses enormously. So if you cut it in half, say, you don't have to cut it by 99.99, 97%. You just cut it in half. Um, Farmers could see a, 60-ish% increase on average to the profitability of their farms. And that would be sort of on average, but since this would be spread across farmers in a much more egalitarian way, a struggling farm that was operating at, like the $1.10 to $1.20 range, they would be seeing 80 to like 160% improvements in their in their profitability. Uh, Highly successful farms who might not be that happy about the fact that it's, not that great for them. But if you're already getting a margin of 24%, you're doing very, very well. But in those kinds of cases, they might be seeing something like a 30%, 30, 35% improvement. And again, if your business was suddenly 30% more profitable, uh, you know, it might be time to take the wife and kids to Paris and Rome or something like the- even at the sort of extravagantly good end, you're still talking about life-changing alterations. And so as this permeates across basically all productive systems, from mining to farming to logging to fishing and so on. These markets affect all of these various fields. We would see probably a large scale transfer of job opportunities from largely senseless work that is, declining rapidly if how much people are willing to pay for it, to much more valuable and productive work uh, being rewarded commensurate with, having food to eat, which strikes me as something that is pretty important.
Okay. So you've been in this legal battle for, you said about 4 years, was it?
Well, so I started trying to get the patent in 2015. It took me a year to find an attorney and get the thing filed. So the patent was actually filed, the full patent application was filed in 2016. Um, and we started sort of back and forthing with them about a year and a half before 2020. So back in 2019, uh, uh, they were bringing up objections. We were coming back. This is sort of an ordinary part of the patent process, but some of the things that they're talking about now, so like the claim that it's overly broad, we dealt with that in 2019, 5 years ago, when my attorneys had a conference call with the examiner with the intent to come up with language that was not overbroad, and essentially got it dictated to us how to write the language so that it wouldn't be overbroad. So my legal expenses at this point go back close to 10 years. Um, I'm coming up on 9.5 next month. Uh, and and this phase of the battle, yeah, would be more like 4 years.
Okay. So I'm just trying to get my head around because I'm in Iowa and we do a lot of the commodity with the farmers and everything as well. So just the idea that for that long a time, something that could have been such a helpful asset to, everybody, how much opportunity loss there's been just by not optimizing to that level.
Oh, it's trillions of dollars that they have wasted
Yeah.
to date.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get my head around because I was like, that's a
Trillions
billion.
of your personal dollars that they wasted by claiming that one and two was the same number. Yeah.
Just thinking about how much, just even on a federal level, how much we would have been able to pay back what we owe just by being able to anyway, that's unfathomable. So what
It's not that unfathomable. So here's how to kind of wrap your head around this. The US economy is in the kind of low 20s of trillions of dollars, and the overhead cost of commodity exchange, according to government figures, is around $1 trillion. So once again, cutting that cost in half removes a deadweight loss of somewhere in the 2 to 2.5% range from the US economy, which would cause the US economy to grow 2 to 2.5 points faster than it otherwise would. The way 2 to 2.5 points is actually starting to look like a good year compared to like where we've been for the last 4 decades. So the way net present value works is that when you sort of create this exponential discounting of the future to the present to figure out how much wealth actually exists. So if the growth rate of your country doubles, which is like what cutting the costs in half looks like, then the net present value of your country doubles. So so the United States would be twice as wealthy with the general adoption of this technology.
Okay, well, I'm upset for you and for everybody else at the moment. So we spoke before, and one thing that you mentioned is this isn't normal as far as this level of railroading or I guess opposition that you're facing with the patent office. or am I wrong?
Well, yeah, so I've sort of told my story when and as the opportunity is presented to about a dozen, a little bit more patent attorneys over the last 4 years since it's going into crazy territory. And none of them have ever heard anything like I'm telling to anybody. But in researching for my brief that I was writing, I don't need money for an attorney anymore. I actually read the there's a huge set of procedures that is set forth that effectively the law mandates that everybody has to follow in order to acquire patents. It's called the like manual patent procedure, MPEP. I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but um, Section 1308 uh, details what the patent office is allowed to do after they've issued a notice of acceptance. And the only way for them to not provide a patent, assuming that you've actually paid your fees after doing that, is they have to sign a letter saying that they're not going to do it for specific reasons. And as part of this case, the patent office themselves have put together an appendix of the 605 pages of the communications between me and the patent office, my law office and the patent office. But there's 605 pages that got built up over the last umpty years. Uh, and it includes uh, around the 350 mark. I think that's about right. It includes their notice of acceptance. It includes my fee payment, and it doesn't include any letter of withdrawal at all. And the language is quite explicit. It is shall issue, and so they're in violation of the law. And having a double, so they reaccepted after that, and then they actually created a letter of withdrawal for the second acceptance. Uh, but that hardly, that hardly means anything because, you don't you can't sort of retroactively do it right the second time. Generally speaking, certainly there's nothing in the manual of procedure for where we presently exist. Uh, and and my attorneys rather gently brought that up to the Patent Trial and Appeal Board, what is sometimes known as Patent Court, and they chose to simply completely ignore that 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 aspect of our case. So I'm hammering it a lot, tighter in my representation to the judges whenever it gets to them.
So this isn't common. You have all this evidence. Why you? What was it that, you think that it's like, why are you having to deal with this?
I really have absolutely no idea what's going on. I mean, I don't have the investigative resources to, go and peer in people's heads, and I can't talk to any of the people that are involved. That's like not how the system works. There's fairly good reasons for the system to have a, sharp divide between inventors and certain parts of the patent office, so that's all fine. But uh, I was doing a little bit of math for my objection to their extension, and the least damaging explanation of what's going on for the patent office would be that I would be the subject of a criminal conspiracy that is intentionally suppressing this for some nefarious reason. Because if this is any strain of incompetence, the number of people involved in being this incompetent uh, is large enough that either it would be, sort of a one in many thousands of trillions chance, basically, that I just happen to get this unlucky, or a pretty solid majority, like 80, maybe even 90% of the patent office would have to be so incompetent that they couldn't do their jobs. And sort of the only alternative to either, like, multiple lightning strike, meteor strikes, lottery victories simultaneously, or the entire institution being so rotten that it just can't function, um, is that somebody somewhere, uh, doesn't want their rice bowl broken, or so their friend's rice bowl broken, and is intentionally, piling as many lead bars onto the scales as they can find.
Yeah, that's not hard to believe when you're talking trillions of dollars. That somebody would just say, "Nah, we're gonna protect what we have going here." And faith in the federal government isn't at an all-time high, so a lot of people will probably land at the same conclusion without even doing the math, just a basic, reasoning. Hey, you're doing something that would be hugely impactful to everybody all the time, everywhere. There's probably people that don't want that. So that's the simple high level math on my side. But what can I do, or what can anybody else do to help you out, or what are some things that maybe people on your side might be able to do?
Well, I did put up a petition at change.org, and people that would like to sort of sign that and register an interest in having a better future, that would be great. Also, just, reaching out to me, connecting on LinkedIn, for example, or reaching out personally, uh, is also potentially helpful. If if you just wanted to sort of privately register that you're interested in having a better economy, at some point, uh, that's a very slow path, but very large numbers of people. So if you are interested in that kind of a path, in addition to sort of reaching out and letting me know that you have an interest, reaching out to your friends and letting them know that they should have an interest as well. Uh, uh, Companies like Robinhood, which is unfortunately a scam, but still got funded and got to start, got started by having a successful viral marketing campaign, get millions of people expressing an interest. And while one voice is one voice and not a million voices, sort of every bit starts and helps on something like that. So something like that is something that anybody can contribute what they can contribute to.
Yeah, and I think people need to hear it. They need to know, what's going on, what your story is, what the potential outcome could be. It's like you said, a better economy sometime. We're all in it, right? We should probably all be rowing the boat in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, even billionaires have to eat, and I'm unaware of self-sufficient cultures outside of, like uncontacted tribes in like the central Amazon or some parts of the South Pacific. So, for the rest of us, certainly everyone that will ever hear this message, uh, uh, improving the amount of effort it takes to do the thing that we need done so we can have food and construction materials and energy and everything else, it's a big shift.
Yeah. And the best way for people to get a hold of you, you mentioned LinkedIn. What do you prefer?
LinkedIn's good. If you want to get a hold of me privately, Noah P. Healy at yahoo.com, is I regularly monitor that. And so yeah, you can just send me an email.
Perfect. And I'll put all that stuff in the description so people don't have to hunt for it. But Noah, I really appreciate you coming on. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure we could go on for another indeterminate, I don't know, forever. I have a million questions, and I know a lot of other people do, so they should absolutely reach out to you about it. Um, I don't even know what questions that I'll have because there's a lot to digest here. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again, but I recommend you guys reach out to Noah. Like I said, he's the exact same here as he, every other time that I met him. So please do. If anybody out there would like to get in touch with him, like I said, this stuff's going in the description. If you'd like to get a hold of me for an introduction, feel free. I'm happy to do that for you as well. Otherwise, if anybody out there'd like to be interviewed, feel free to reach out to me as well. Happy to have you on. But again, Noah, I really appreciate you coming on and taking your time and kind of going through your story with us. It's really, really interesting. I think a lot of people need to hear it, and start looking at it or do something about it. So let's all get out there. Let's try and make a difference and meet some more people. All right.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Take care.